Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 71. And what are today's topics?
Conservative can't define woke, ICC arrest warrant on Putler, France protests, Conservatives being woke, more TikTok banning BS, Republicans unplanned heterosexual couple school ban, and Russo-Ukraine war becoming a forever war?
Well, a bunch of topics today. So, what do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with the one that I decided on. Conservative can't define woke.
Yep, you brought this up. I actually was thinking about this, but I wasn't so sure, but you brought up, so we're going to talk about it. And everyone, Sam Cedar, Kyle, Mike, Dole, all of them covered this recently. So, there was this idiot conservative writer who did a book about how bad woke is and all that. And of course, they went on the Hill with Brianna Joy Gray, and she asked him, what's your definition of woke? And she literally could not give a definition. It was hilarious. But again, are you surprised? Because I'm not.
Nope.
So yeah, let's watch Kyle make fun of her. And also give his definition of woke, which makes sense.
Alright, welcome to the show, everybody.
Kyle, for the love of God, stop doing your 2-minute intros. I hate it. Just stop.
Is an author. Apparently, she wrote the book
Stop.
Youth.
Just make
Stop.
Make it its own video, Kyle. Seriously.
Like you used to. Just stop.
I know, yeah.
And likewise, stop being a traitorous brunette or black and go back to it instead of being a fake blonde.
Her lane is what you would call anti-woke. And she went on Rising, and Brianna Joy Gray asked her a very simple, very straightforward question. By the way, something that people generally haven't done in conversations about wokeness. Usually they talk about wokeness, nobody manages or nobody defines their terms. But Brianna Joy Gray goes, just so I know we're on the same page, can you define wokeness for me? And look at what happens.
And probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, you know, when we talk about traditional...
What does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to...
Come on. If you wrote a book about how woke is, surely you should have a definition you could just do right off the top off your head. Like, come on.
And we've spent an entire chapter defining it.
Yeah.
It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Oh, that's so embarrassing. I've told you guys for a long time now that, throwing the wet blanket of wokeness over any issue is the right's go-to move to sort of delegitimize everything they disagree with. So we've heard the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage is woke,
every single time,
universal health care is woke.
Years.
And of course, my favorite recent
about
one...
every 2 to 3 years it happens.
Just like woke eventually won't be the word they use much longer.
This bank collapse brought about by deregulation and not diversifying and having a good business model.
That's
woke.
Yes.
I was thinking about that, but then I saw other topics that lost in the thought of looking up stuff. We need to cover that in the future. Maybe we should write that down in future topics for episode 73, because this is episode 72 I just looked up.
SVB crash was wokeness. That's what led to it. Those are so mind-numbingly stupid that I don't think people who are inside that bubble really grasp how dumb they look when they make an argument like that. And there's a lot of them who've been making that argument. Ron DeSantis made that argument. Donald Trump Jr. made that argument. There were Republican politicians who came out and made that argument. It is beyond embarrassing. You guys are a joke. So look, let's actually define the term. Let me give you two definitions. One of them will be like the steel manning the case definition, and the other one will be, I don't want to say straw manning the case, but I would say like a harsher definition of wokeness.
It's what they really mean.
The good definition would be
it.
It's just being awake to injustice or alert to injustice. That's sort of the traditional idea when it came about however many years ago. If somebody said, like, stay woke, it means, hey, keep your eyes opened, stay enlightened, perceive injustice around you so we could try to fix it. That's the steel man version of what is wokeness. The harsher definition, so more with the negative connotation and implication, is that wokeness is authoritarianism in service of perceived social justice.
Yes,
so it's
I've
sort of
seen
like
that
this
quite
idea
often.
that the ends justify the means.
That's a
if
good
you-
definition.
Or like how we covered before, like corporations and other SJW retards use like id pull to get away from criticism, or rainbow capitalism, or to like force id pull like on characters like in media and entertainment and all that. Like, oh, you gotta have your minority, your woman quotas and all that and stuff like that. Yeah, I would call that woke. Not, oh, you support BLM gay rights. No, that's not woke. That's based.
Yep.
I like my
do
space,
what you
but
view as
pause.
fighting for social justice. So just to give some examples of that, the classic example, of course, is censoring someone. They say something bad or mean or evil or racist or sexist or whatever, according to your perception, and then you say, you know what, this person shouldn't be allowed to say it, and you try to get them censored.
And what they say probably isn't
getting somebody
any of them,
fired,
which is very
over
common.
things that fall into that category. Getting somebody banned over a joke. I mean, the go-to example that people use is comedians getting canceled is a clear example of wokeness gone too far. Getting a political college campus speaker kicked off from giving a speech because students don't want it because they don't agree with the speaker. That's a classic example of wokeness gone too far. Okay, you're probably noticing something at this point in the conversation. None of this stuff is overly complicated. It's actually very simple. It's actually very straightforward. But a person who wrote a book on wokeness being bad cannot define wokeness. She was stumbling and bumbling and you couldn't sum it up in a little soundbite. And the example she gave is wrong. Like, her definition was wrong. Redoing all of society. Blah, 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 blah. It's got nothing to do with any of that. Look, you'll notice something. Usually, the harshest critics of wokeness are the ones who can't define it. Because
And a lot of times, they're woke themselves, which we're covering later. They're woke in the right-wing way of woke.
Everything I don't like. Everything that's slightly left of Mussolini equals wokeness. That's where we are now. So look, we've hit peak wokeness phobia, if you ask me. Like it's come on, it's on the decline now. It can't keep going at this pace because it's become embarrassing. It's become sad, and people always redirect every single issue back to it, and they can't even frickin' define it. And look, this is coming from somebody. You guys know me. I have no problem criticizing. If I think people on the left are acting in an authoritarian way, I'm against the authoritarianism by its very nature. So I'm going to call that out. I'm going to be against censoring people. I'm going to be against getting people fired. I'm going to be against getting people banned over a joke or whatever it is.
Left, remember.
But like, that is a reasonable anti-woke perspective. These people are not reasonable. You know what they realize? Here's the thing. They realized they were onto something because it became very popular to bash wokeness. And when that became super popular online and it became its own like genre, they realized, oh my God, we have a rare issue where we're seemingly on the winning side. Because the right generally isn't on the winning side, you know, especially the right-wing politicians. They don't want to raise the minimum wage. They don't want unions. They don't want universal health care. They don't want to get money out of politics. So lose. It's just down the lines, losses. They're, you know, the public is against them. They found one issue where they resonated. They struck a nerve. And they were like, oh, we're going to ride this bitch into the sunset. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to say everything is wokeness now that we don't like and bash it. And then hopefully people won't realize that we're playing a trick. It is a trick on them. It's a trick to try to gin up support for our colossally unpopular agenda. And so, look, massive props, massive shout out there to Brianna Joy Gray.
Yeah,
she really did.
That it is.
Without even really trying, she was sincerely asking the question. She just ripped the mask off the whole game that they're playing. You know? And they're not sending their best, let's say. The anti-woke folks are not sending their best. And it's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of sad.
Well, that's because they're stupid. And by and large, they just don't like LGBT rights, BLM, and stuff like that. And that's what they think is woke.
Or they just don't like. Or they also don't like black people. They just don't like black people.
I wish the anti-woke people were principled in their opposition to authoritarianism.
Conservatives?
Because they're only against
Consistent?
authoritarianism
No.
towards the ends of social
impossible.
justice
You know
or
that.
perceived social justice. They
Yeah,
are
they-
not against authoritarianism.
No, they don't
if
have
it's
the
in
concept.
the interest of anti-wokeness. So, for example, great example, Ron DeSantis has gone on an anti-woke crusade where he's massively authoritarian in service of being anti-woke. So the
Banning
same thing
gays
that's
from
bad with
schools,
quote-unquote
book
wokeness,
banning,
they have
all
embodied as
woke
well, the
bullshit from
authoritarianism.
the right.
When you ban
Yep.
books left and right, and then, by the way, he lies about it and says, I'm only banning porn, little kids from seeing porn. That is
You think
fundamentally
everything is
untrue.
porn? That's
That is
woke
not true at
bullshit.
all. We've seen the stories. John
Exactly.
Legum over
That's why you ban
Popular Info
everything.
has done lists of like, hey, here are the books that are being banned. You got books that are about civil rights heroes. You got books
But
that are
we
about
don't like
you know,
civil rights, remember,
females
Kyle?
who made it in
Yep,
a
they don't
professional
like civil
sport
rights.
and their
They-
personal stories.
They want to
You have
reinstitute
well-known books that
slavery.
in no world is it inappropriate for anybody, and they're banning it. It's
It's
on the list of
inappropriate
banned
to
books.
talk about.
600 books have been banned in
negatively
Florida.
about Hitler.
And I
It's
haven't even gotten
inappropriate
into
to
the
talk negatively about the
anti-rioting law
Holocaust.
that DeSantis
things like
signed,
that.
which is really an attempt to crack down on all protest he doesn't like if it's for issues that he doesn't like. That's another example of authoritarianism in service of quote-unquote anti-wokeness. So you have this thing where it's become like a fundamentalist religion where you
Always
have
has
people
been in one
embracing
form or another.
authoritarianism because in their minds, the ends justify the means. But I'm here to tell you, the ends don't justify the means, and authoritarianism is wrong by its very nature. And if you're embracing it for any perceived ideology, think again, because it's a bad idea, and it will always come back to bite you in the ass too. So there is no principle. The anti-woke people are just as authoritarian, if not more authoritarian, than the people they criticize. They've become the devil they're theoretically trying to avoid. But they don't care because, again, it's in favor of their agenda, which they view as right no matter what. So if we become authoritarians and defend our agenda, well, we're still the good guys. No, you're not. No, you're not at all. So anyway, great clip there from Brianna Joy Gray. By the way, have some fun. Next time you're in around somebody who's quote-unquote anti-woke, ask them to define it. You'd be surprised, man. I don't think any of them can give you a fair definition. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and
So, yeah. What do you gotta say about that?
I love that clip because it was absolutely showed that they really do have no idea what they're talking about.
As conservatives, always never have any idea what they're talking about. Which is why
Yep.
you all need to just shut the hell up and go away and leave this stuff to us progressives. Because we know how to fix this
Exactly.
shit. You never will. So, eat crap. Alright, so now,
Yep.
on to the next topic.
And that will be ICC arrest warrant for Putler.
You mean Putler.
Putler, that's right.
Oh boy, Harry and Danny boy were not too happy to hear this.
Of course they weren't. Of course they weren't. They're fascists who want genocide. What do you expect?
Danny boy, a fascist? Impossible. He's a MAGA communist, remember?
Nah, he's a maggot Stalinist.
So anyways, Putler, as the affectionate name for Putin, has an arrest warrant on him for war crimes and of course kidnapping kids to take them back to Russia to try and fix their population decline, or in other words, another form of genocide to try and take away Ukraine's kids. And of course, some other woman's also has an arrest warrant too, and this is absolutely hilarious. Now, of course, we know damn well nothing's gonna come of this. He's not gonna be arrested anytime soon. Russia's not in the ICC, so they're not gonna follow it. And if they did, they're just gonna straight up refuse. And no one's gonna go there and do it for him because Russia. Because, you know, have you seen Medvedev, Russia's former president, already threaten nuclear war if they even try to do anything like that? Like, no one's gonna go over there to do anything. And there are countries like Germany who, as ICC have said, if Putler comes to Germany, they will do it. So I think Putler is going to make sure he goes to places that he knows for a fact are not going to try and get him for any time soon. Because we know countries in Europe will do it. America, even though America is not an ICC either, because for the same reason, because they don't want to be called out for the imperialism either, I think they would do it this time around if Putler decided to come over.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This is funny and all, but it's not going to lead to any changes whatsoever, and he's not going to get arrested. But what do you have to say about it?
I mean, hey, and even if nothing comes from it, it's something, which is better than the ICC usually does.
Plus, it's funny watching Russophiles mauled and rage like Medvedev
Yes.
did, and Danny Boy and Harry and all of them.
Yeah.
Just like he also had a meltdown when I called him Putler. That I'm a child to call him that because he's not a Nazi. He's not even a white supremacist or anything. He told me before.
He's a Russian Nazi, which is
Yes.
almost the same thing. Only it's basically Russia instead of Germany. And remember that not only are the Wagner Group Nazis, but the Chechens are basically Nazis, but their religion is Islam instead of Christianity.
Yep. All fascists. So yeah.
Yep.
Please, Putler, please turn yourself in, or please just die. And maybe your genocide on Ukraine would end, hopefully. Fascist POS. So, now, on to the next topic. Oh, wait, actually, before we forgot, let's watch Kyle's video because Kyle actually
So
kind of
this
made a little
story
bit of a
came
fool of himself in it.
The other day, I
Oh.
thought it was pretty interesting. ICC, that's the International Criminal Court, issues arrest warrant for Putin over alleged war crimes, including unlawful deportation of children. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin, accusing him of war crimes in Ukraine. The ICC announced the warrant on Friday and said Putin is allegedly responsible for the war crime of unlawful deportation of children, of population, unlawful deportation of population, and then in parentheses, children, and that of unlawful transfer of population, children, from occupied areas of Ukraine to the Russian Federation.
Estimated to be in the tens of
Separately,
thousands
the court
right
issued
now.
a warrant for Maria
Yeah.
Lvova-Belova, nice name, Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights, on the same charges. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan opened an investigation into possible war crimes against humanity and genocide in Ukraine a year ago. He highlighted during 4 trips to Ukraine that he was looking at alleged crimes against children and the targeting of civilian infrastructure. Moscow has reportedly denied being responsible for a number of war crimes they've been accused of since invading
course.
Ukraine. They are, quote, there are reasonable grounds to believe that Putin bears individual criminal responsibility for the aforementioned crimes. Fox News reported on Friday that Moscow responded to the arrest warrants by saying they are not part of the International Criminal Court and they have no responsibility to the organization.
Which is
Quote, the
unfortunately
decisions of the
true.
International Criminal Court have no meaning for our
Yep.
country.
And even if they
including
were
from a
part of
legal point
ICC, we
Russian
know they
Foreign
would have
Ministry
refused.
spokeswoman Maria
Yep.
Zakharova said in the statement. So, I mean, this is the exact thing the U.S. says, by the way. This is the exact thing the U.S. says. Like, oh, you can't come after us because we're not even part of your...
Yep, exactly,
shitty
and that's
little court.
bullshit too.
The court's president, Pyotr Hofmansky, said the
As
execution of
American
these warrants will
presidents are
depend
war
on
criminals
international
too, and they
cooperation.
should
In other words,
all
Yep.
we really don't
face
have
the
a
same
way of
punishment as
enforcing this, but we
Putler.
just hope that somebody will
Same
enforce it.
with same
and
with
the international
several of
community will
the
cooperate.
most recent
That's kind of
British
consistent with
and
what they're saying
Australian
there.
PMs.
So they're just brushing it aside. Look, in terms of the specific war crimes that Putin committed, I think there's a laundry list of them. I don't know about the unlawful transfer of children thing, the kidnapping.
Like, really? Kyle, you don't know about this?
You don't know about this?
This has been a thing since the war began. Like, how do you not know that? Like, come on, you gotta cover this more. Like, I cover this almost every single day for crying out loud.
I really have no idea about that. I've never
But then again, knowing his takes on foreign policy, he probably would make an L take too, remember?
read any articles about that. I've never seen any evidence of that. But to me, that's really beside the point because what we know for sure is there's been targeting of civilian infrastructure without a doubt, and even purposeful killing of civilians. There was a video that went viral on Twitter the other day of a Russian soldier just executing in cold blood a Ukrainian who they had as their prisoner.
Yep, and I saw that too on
He was
Twitter.
standing there smoking a cigarette, and they just gunned him down. And so that alone
Because he
is
had the
a war
nerve to
crime.
say Slava
So you
Ukraini.
have the purposeful targeting of
Yeah.
civilians,
Get fucked.
the purposeful targeting of civilian infrastructure, just the illegal and offensive invasion against a country that didn't attack them. That's the other part of this. Now, my contention to you guys, I mean, Putin admitted this in his speech when he said that Russia was going to invade and do the special military operation or whatever they called it. He basically said, like, Ukraine is a fake state and we want to get back to the glory of the Russian Empire. Which is kind of like, hey, idiot, these are the things you're supposed to, like, cover. You're supposed to stick to your your justification and rationalizations.
But Nazis
right?
are
Just
not
like when the
very
US
smart,
invaded
as we
Iraq.
all know.
Oh,
Exactly.
Saddam worked with Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and he kept, making that point, and then they had to move the goalpost. Oh, he's just a really bad guy and a dictator, bro. So, but you have to
Putler the
stick with your
Nazi.
line of BS so that
Putler the Nazi,
people
Putler
don't
the
see your
Nazi.
real reasons. And he admitted in the launch of the invasion, like, yeah, it's a fake state and it's ours, and we're gonna go ahead and take it back. But the other thing is, it's not a coincidence that they just found oil and gas off the coast of Crimea a year before Putin invaded into Crimea. That was what, 2012, 2014, roughly thereabouts.
Yep.
And then same thing here. He invades Ukraine. This is soon after they had discovered massive natural gas deposits in Ukraine, like right after that. So there's so many parallels to the Iraq War, because that was also one of the reasons the U.S. invaded Iraq, was also we wanted control of the oil. And the oil
Although
production
not to
shot
the
up
same
massively
extent
after
that
we invaded
Russia
and
wants
took control
Ukraine. We
of the
weren't
infrastructure. So
genociding the
there-
Iraqis, nor were we going to
Yep.
try and take them over.
There are many parallels there. My point is, I don't know about the specific war crimes they're trying to get him on, but he's guilty of so many of them that they should probably go for the slam dunk cases. But it's all going to come to naught anyway, because our international institutions are so hollowed out and vapid, and you don't have everybody signing on to them. And this is Russia throwing back in the U.S.'s face what the U.S. says as well about the International Criminal Court. In fact, the Pentagon tried to block these International Criminal Court charges against Russia because they felt like if we open this door, they could come after us too, meaning U.S. leaders who are war criminals. And we just covered that story not so long ago.
Which is what it
Good,
should
like-
be,
Look,
because
my-
America
Yeah, nearly
also
every-
has
nearly
evil
every-
people in power like Putler.
Yep, nearly every single U.S. president. Hell, as I said, Washington D.C. Like you pull a few of the politicians out, and you pull the civilians out, so that the innocent civilians aren't affected too badly. But I said, you do that, you pull like Bernie and a few of them out who are against the war, and then you just drop a nuke on the White House.
Even though that would affect us few hours away.
You do it just small. You do it small enough that that it would just be the White House, and then it'd be like minimal effects for the rest of you.
Is very simple. Totally based. Go after Vladimir Putin. Nothing's going to come of
we
this,
don't
but that
recognize
sucks. I wish
Putin
we
here.
lived in a
It's
system where
Putler,
there was a law and order
It's
at the
Putler.
international scale, and people could be held accountable for their crimes, because I think that these innocent civilians, their lives mattered, and they're not treated like that, right? I mean, it's still a very primitive type system that we live under, where internationally there's very little justice. But I would go after Putin, and I would also go after George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. At the very least. I mean, there we're just getting started, because, funny enough, this was just the 20-year anniversary of Iraq. Just happened a few days ago, the Iraq invasion.
Yep.
And I want to remind everybody what we're dealing with here. Now, this is an article that came out, I think, in 2013. And so it's been way worse. It's way worse now than it was then. But this was the most comprehensive breakdown of the war in Iraq that I've ever seen. And I brought it up on a number of occasions. So here's what they say. Business Insider article based on a report about what happened on the ground. Brookings Institute report, the Cost of War project. This is what happened on the ground in Iraq. There were 189,000 direct war deaths. 4,480.
And those deaths are the low estimate, as the article showed in the video. It was estimated that up to 1 million or 2 million were killed, actually. And I think it was 5 million were displaced from Iraq because of the invasion. Pretty similar numbers in terms of relocation that Ukraine's suffering right now.
U.S. service personnel killed directly. 32,223 troops injured, and that doesn't include people.
Yep. 4,000, almost 4,500 Americans killed, which, hey, compared to Russia's 200, almost 200,000 in slightly over a year, compared to America in 8 years, shows we know what we're doing around here, unlike them.
PTSD.
Yeah.
134,000 civilians killed directly. 655,000 people who died in Iraq since the invasion that would not have died if the invasion had not occurred. 150 reporters were killed. 2.8 million people who remain either internally displaced or have fled the country. 1.7 trillion is the amount in war expenses spent by the U.S. Treasury Department for
Medicare
fiscal
for
year
all
2013.
of all that money would have been
Obviously, way more
awesome.
now. When all said and done, it's $7 trillion.
As the Amazing Atheist said when he responded to Kraut and T, he said that with the war in Iraq, war also costs us between $4 and $6 trillion. Sure, could have used that money when our economy crashed in 2008. But then again, maybe without that expenditure, the crash wouldn't have happened.
$5,000 is the amount that was spent per second in the war. $350,000 is the cost to deploy just one American military member. $490 billion is the amount in war benefits owed to war veterans.
Which conservatives try to cut at all costs.
Yep.
$7 trillion is what it's going to cost when all is said and done by 2053. $20 billion is the amount paid to KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root. It's a contractor responsible for equipment and services. They got no bid contracts, by the way. $3 billion is the amount of KBR payments Pentagon auditors consider, quote, questionable. So that's basically what they were stealing, what the defense contractors were stealing. $60 billion is the amount paid for reconstruction, which was ruled a waste due to corruption and shoddy work. $4 billion is the amount owed to the U.S. by Iraq before the invasion. 1.6 million is the gallons of oil used by U.S. forces each day in Iraq. 12 billion is the cost per month of the war by 2008.
Which has probably single-handedly added like 0.3 degrees to climate change.
Yep, America's military is a big emitter for pollution and CO2. That is unfortunate reality too.
$1 billion is the amount owed to Iraq by the U.S. after the war. And they go on to say it cost $20 billion just to do air conditioning there. We have $546 million in missing weapons, 190,000 guns missing, 110,000 AK-47s.
AK-47s? We don't use that weapon in America. What? That's weird.
40% is
really
how much
weird.
of an increase there was in Iraqi oil production after we invaded. What a coincidence. $5 billion is the revenue from Iraqi oil in 2003. $85 billion is the revenue from Iraqi oil in 2011.
Well, to be fair, Iraq's economy massively increased in the 8 years after the war, too. That is what happens when a country went through war. They usually build back up.
It went from non-existent to barely functioning. So and that is huge.
And then we have $150 billion is the amount that oil companies are expected to invest in oil development over the next decade. $75 billion is the approximate amount expected to go to American subcontracting companies, largest of all, Halliburton. And then 0 is, of course, the number of nuclear weapons of mass destruction that were found, though a bunch of chemical weapons were discovered, and we knew about those existing because we sold them to Saddam Hussein.
Yep.
We gave it to him at the height of his atrocities against the Kurds. So this is the Iraq War. So you want to go after Vladimir Putin for his war crimes? Sign me up. 100% on board with
Go
that.
after every
But in order to maintain
go after
legitimacy,
Bush and Obama, and
in order
also
to be
go after
serious
Tony Blair and John
about
Howard.
justice truly being blind and the system truly being fair, arrest Bush, arrest...
And not only the damage it does, not only the damage it did, but the Iraq War pretty much killed America's credibility for a really long time. To the point now, we have idiots that defend Russia and China for doing whatever they do because fuck America. Gee, maybe if America didn't invade Iraq, maybe we would look better to most of the world, so we would have more credibility.
I also remember, what was something else I was going to say, but, oh well.
Bring them all up on war crimes. And a day where Putin, Bush, and Cheney all go down for their war crimes would be a good day. But again, I won't hold my breath.
So long as it also takes down Tony Blair and John Howard too.
Piss off. We don't abide by your little court. We don't believe in law and order. We believe in us above everybody else. We believe in no consequences for us because we've defined ourselves as the good guy. That's what
America, unfortunately, is so powerful that they can just defy that, just like that. Whereas Putler cannot as easily.
They're all wrong. If you want to see me and Kristen Ball
so me and Zeke can too, though.
So yeah, what do you guys say about that?
I mean, this is why people like Jason Dinkelberg exist, at least in part.
Yep.
because of what America did in the Middle East. And now they're like, the USA did this in the Middle East, therefore Russia should be allowed to commit genocide. And I'm like, and China should be allowed to drop a nuke on Taiwan. I'm like, the fuck is wrong with you? No. How about it's bad when America does it and it's bad when Russia and China do it?
But America always bad, Russia, China always good. You know how it goes, remember? American diabolism for the win.
You American, you Chinese dick sucker.
I think Hinkleboy would actually might view it as a compliment.
He probably would.
No, he would definitely view it as a compliment if it was a Putler dick sucker.
Yep.
Fucking idiots. Now, on to the next topic.
Protests.
So, yeah, as we all know, France historically always has major protests, as we've seen over the centuries. And a new one just happened recently. And you want to know why? Because Macron, France's president, raised the retirement age, and he did it pretty much in a way that's viewed as undemocratic. Gee, why am I not surprised? So, France is always mauled for the right reason.
So what the hell is going on in France? That's a question many people are probably asking, because it is absolute chaos and rage that's unfolding over there. So let me give you a breakdown of what's happening, and we'll discuss it in detail here. So More Perfect Union has a great thread getting into all the specifics. You might have seen that France seems upset. Strikes, protests, riots. Why the outrage? Well, it started early this year, when President Macron proposed changing the pension system, which would essentially raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. So we'll get to the thread in a second, but I want to give you a little visual representation of what's happening on the ground here. Take a look.
Very interesting video so far. Really much nothing.
Now look, this is actually one of the more tame videos I've seen. We'll get to some more in a little bit. The proposal faced immediate resistance. Just days after his government announced the plan, hundreds of thousands of people flooded the streets of cities and towns across the country, and unions called strikes that disrupted transport, schools, and other public services.
Nice.
Guys, stop and think about that.
Why can't we do that? Oh, that's right, we can do it in America, but Biden prevented that happening with the rail strike last November, remember?
It's like the polar opposite of the
that
US.
from happening because he,
what
because he
happens in the US
also
is
supports,
stiff
because he's also literally murdered workers. Not as many as Trump, but he has murdered workers.
We'll pull, individuals.
That's part of his job is worker
we
murder.
don't have this collective.
That's the job of
mindset,
being a
this
corporate
solidarity
terrorist.
mindset. Well, this is, I'm telling you, night and day. There's a great quote in an old Michael Moore documentary where he says, in the U.S., the people are scared of the government. In France, the government is scared of the people. And, maybe that helps explain why, for example, they have universal health care and we don't. All right, they
Plus
continue
they're smarter
here.
than us.
Yep.
But Macron pushed. He
That's
insisted
because
that
on
he
average
would alter the
Americans are
pension
stupider than French people.
system and attempted to get it through Parliament. In January, he said, "We will do it with respect in a spirit of dialogue, but also determination and responsibility." But even as he said that, riot police were clashing with protesters in the streets of Paris. Macron insisted that in a country with an aging population where everyone receives a state pension, pension reform is the only way to keep the system solvent.
The same BS crap that conservatives say in America about Social Security.
Yep.
That it's going to go bankrupt if we don't do anything about it. Even though a simple fix is just to remove the cap so rich fucks have to pay for Social Security too, and it's solvent for the next 100 plus years. Just a simple fix like that. But put taxes on the rich? That's evil, That's communism. Can't have that.
We must reduce the amount of people on Social Security to 0 to save it from itself. Because we're evil.
Yep.
Fires. That's a lot of people, dude. That is a lot of people.
Just another day in France, pretty much, Kyle. Wow. You should know that.
Yep.
Have you seen all the historical protests in France over the
centuries?
Freaking, can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but how Napoleon got into power because of stuff like this, for crying out loud.
Rights and propose a tax on the wealthy or more payroll contributions from employers to finance the pension system. In other words,
exactly what we need to do in America.
Raise taxes on the rich to keep the system solvent. Don't punish working people and seniors. Polls show most French people also oppose the reform. By the way, new poll just came out on Macron. 28% approval rating in France.
Even Biden's not that bad. Even Trump didn't get that low, even after January 6th. I mean, but another thing, too, that's also very common for French presidents, like, near the end of their terms, are always, like, in the tens and stuff like that. So another thing, that's just another day for them.
That is down there in George W. Bush, Dick Cheney territory at the end of their time in office, when they had the economy fall off a cliff and they had multiple illegal wars and a torture scandal.
And maybe that's why you shouldn't have voted for him when he pretty much made it clear he was going to do this, even back in 2017. You know what you were getting. Now you're going to have to suffer for it. And I don't want to hear the Le Pen and all that. That's not a valid reason. And also, when it comes to pensions, Le Pen is actually on to the left on this issue. So
she actually wants the pension system to exist, unlike the corporate moron that Macron is.
Now, of course, she's a fascist piece of shit, too, so we shouldn't believe her like we didn't believe Trump. But her at least saying that gives her more credibility to people, unlike Macron, who's openly said for years he wants to do this.
Well, Trump was actually higher.
He's openly said that he wants to make Social Security illegal.
For January 6th. Wow, that's amazing. Trump had like a 31% approval rating at the time. And in late January, the unions escalated. The CGT, a confederation of unions representing nearly 700,000 workers, cut power to a swath of wealthy suburbs by the Orly airport outside of Paris. They even briefly cut electricity to the Paris headquarters of the moderate CFDT union. Wow. By the way, another one for you. They cut off power to Macron's residence.
Wow.
They cut off power to Macron's residence.
How is that even possible? We shouldn't have generators as backups in case.
That's bold, dog.
I mean, after that, you should just, Macron, you really should just take the L and give up. But neolibs like him, just like conservatives, do not understand giving up on anything until they lose power.
And they need to lose to the left.
Yes.
Some rebuked this radical move, but others called it Robin Hood-esque because of the striking militant union simultaneously gave free power to French schools, hospitals, and low-income homes. Oh my God.
Awesome.
They cut off power to elites, they cut off power to Macron, and they gave free power to French schools, hospitals, and low-income homes.
Because that's what we need to have.
Needless to say,
universal nationalized energy.
Saw multiple days of mass strikes, with estimates ranging up to 2.5 million workers on strike in a single day. Transportation, garbage collection, utilities, and education unions walked off the job. By March, unions were ready to escalate again. Workers had, by this point, held 8 days of mass protests with millions hitting the streets. So now, crucially, some workers decided to abandon one-day strikes for a rolling, ongoing strike. Most noticeably, the garbage collectors went on indefinite strike, and that means trash started to pile up in the streets. Reuters reported on the scene in the streets of Paris. Look at this. Look at that garbage, bro. Look at that garbage. Wow. That's more garbage than I've ever seen in my life.
My mother would have a heart attack seeing all that, too.
Anyway. Bold. This is bold. Now, some people might look at this, oh my God, they've gone too far. They're not picking up the garbage. That leads to health problems. That leads to rat infestation.
Well, that is true. That can't be denied. That is true.
And I'm sure the response of the union would be, right. So I guess you better not make those pension changes. I guess you better not raise the retirement age, huh?
Both things are true.
Then just yesterday, Macron changed his approach. He had been trying to get the legislation passed through the conventional process, but after the massive waves of opposition, he switched his approach, declaring that he would use Article 49.3 of the French Constitution. Article 49.3 enables a government to push a bill through the National Assembly without a vote. It's illegal, but also seen as undemocratic.
Yeah, like I talked about earlier, being seen as undemocratic.
There's a cost. Opposition lawmakers have 24 hours to file a no-confidence motion against the government. So, in other words...
And no-confidence motion is equivalent to, like, impeachment in like the UK and France and all that.
He's willing to risk it all.
Because especially in the UK, since they have more of a parliamentary government, I'm sure you down there probably have the same thing too. You have to have the support of the parliamentarian in order to be in power as like prime minister, basically. And I'm sure France probably has the same thing too.
Raise the retirement age.
Why do you think we had so many prime ministers from 2010 to 2016?
Look at the UK, remember, at the same time.
Yep. Well, with Australia, it was Rudd, Gillard Rudd, Turnbull, Abbott, and then Morrison. And now we're on to Albanese.
And how many of us had in America since 2010? Just Obama, Trump, and Biden.
Yep.
He's going full authoritarian to raise the retirement age. Wow. I have no doubt that Macron thinks like, I'm being the responsible politician here, doing what I must do.
No, you're just being a neo-lib cunt.
Oftentimes people who are corporatists and neoliberals have brainwashed themselves into believing that they're the responsible, intelligent folks. Everybody else is dumb. And
the only thing he is being the smug liberals from that one South Park
with
episode.
The pension system or whatever.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. Honestly, it's embarrassing. Imagine, like, this is the hill you die on. You must work longer hours, senior citizen. You must work for years longer. So, by the way, as of the recording of this segment right now, Francis Macron faces no confidence vote as protesters arrested. Refinery strikes continue.
Let's go. Let's get rid of Macron. A piece of shit he should never have been in power in the first place.
Fails, a bill which will see the retirement age rise from 62 to 64 for most workers by 2030 will go through. If the vote passes, Macron will either appoint a fresh government with a new prime minister or dissolve parliament, triggering new elections. Ongoing strikes and protests over the bill have rocked the country. So, again, as of the recording of this right now, honestly, my guess is they're taking the vote, like, literally right as I speak. That's my guess. But I don't know what's going to happen as of this moment. But, again, I'm just astonished by this is the hill I'm going to die on thing. I'm going to die on raising the retirement age. There are certainly other ways to fix this. And by the way, look, this just shows you other countries, other developed countries have a different relationship towards work than we do in the U.S. Like in the U.S., I do feel like what you do for a living
and I just
becomes
looked
much
it
more
up.
Part of your identity.
This actually happened 4 days ago, and he barely survived the no confidence vote.
How close was it?
He barely survived by 9 votes.
Oh!
Needed 287 votes to get no confidence. He had 278. So 9 short of the required minimum.
Becomes how a lot of people,
which is a rip.
Define their purpose and meaning. Not even like willingly. Sometimes you're like forced to build an identity around what you do for a living because you're there most of your waking hours. But the way it works in other countries, a lot of people, they just view a job as a job. I'm just trying to pay the bills so I can live my life. And they might openly not like what they do. They might hate what they do. And by the way, in the U.S., that is true too. Only 18% of people feel engaged at work. I mean, that's a crisis when like 80% of workers don't like what they do for a living. So if that is the case, if people don't like what they do for a living, then of course you should have a relationship to work more like how the French view it. This is a job. I'm just trying to pay the bills. I'm going to, do what I can to get by, but I want to have a life outside of work. And that's what these strikes represent. These strikes represent working people.
Well, it's not just their view on it. It's just French culture to be like assholes about and protest. That's just not a thing really in America. Like, there's really nothing you could do about it until the culture changes. Whereas France, this is baked into the system for centuries. They had their freaking revolution for Napoleon because of protests.
Demanding leisure time. Because look, any adult will admit there's going to be jobs in society that like people don't want to do, but we got to fill the role, right? And so how should we treat people who are doing something they don't want to do, but we need them to do it? At the very least, you got to give those people high wages. You got to give those people plenty of time off, paid vacation time, paid sick time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you have to make it so that there's a true incentive to get those jobs taken care of. In the U.S., we force them through fear of poverty because we don't have a very good social safety net system. Over there, they have a better social safety net system. So they're trying to keep the hard-fought gains and not lose them and not go in the wrong direction. So, I mean, look, I would say solidarity to these people. I think you could certainly find another way to deal with whatever issues are there with the pension system. And I will mention, to make the comparison with the U.S., like, we hear this all the time here, too. Oh, Social Security and Medicare are going to be insolvent. And then you look at the numbers, and that's 100% not true. It's not even close to true. It's going to go bankrupt. And then you look, and it's like, even a decade out or 2 decades out, it still pays out like 80% of its benefits. What are you talking about? With minor changes, we can keep this thing going. By the way, the change that's floated here, correctly so, is lift the cap on the Social Security tax so that millionaires pay more in taxes, and then we could fund Social Security.
I think it was if you're making over $120,000 a year, you don't pay Social Security whatsoever. If you remove that cap, that's solvent for at least another 100+ years.
As far as the eye can see. So
and also, that would also make it more universal and make it even more likely to be not able to get rid of, because then for everyone pays for it, even the rich who don't even need it. That's how you also make. If you make stuff universal, as we keep pointing out to idiots on the left, it's harder to get rid of it.
Sort of like a mucked up crisis. Like, oh my God, we have to do this, and you don't. I know that's the case in the U.S. Now, I'm not familiar with the numbers for the pension system in France, but there's certainly other ways. There's not only one way to address this, and that one way is like force grandma back into the factory. But Macron wants to die in that hill. Well, we'll see if it works out for him, but my guess is that approval rating is only going to keep going one direction, down. Ever since
typical for French presidents. So, what do you guys say about this?
Well, not surprising. He's a piece of shit who wants to ban Social Security, so that's not surprising coming from him.
Oh, I was just looking.
Good on France.
Yep, and I was looking up polls recently online. This was just as of yesterday. His polls now at 23%.
Eat shit, Macron.
Macron be like, former presidents might hit under 10%. That's nothing for us.
Did you have a president that I think the king that they beheaded had briefly had a approval rating of 0%.
The last president they had, I know, was under 10%, because I remember covering, like, how is that even possible? And stuff like that. But yes, Vive la France in this regard.
Yes.
Fuck you, Macron. Oh, and also, this is going to make it more likely that a piece of shit fascist like Le Pen wins. I'm warning you, France. If you don't want her to win, then stop electing neo-lib pieces of shit like Macron and elect a progressive. It's not that hard, but you have to do it.
I mean, they could always bring the guillotine back.
No, in France, they would probably do that. All right, so now, on to the next topic.
And that'll be because this conservatives being woke.
Yeah.
At least right-wing woke.
Yeah, because Kyle covers recently, a teacher was banned from talking about slavery at school and point out that it was wrong.
I remember that.
Like, guys, we gotta see about that. Teacher banned from saying slavery is wrong at schools. Even though it should be 100% obvious it's wrong. But conservatives don't like that, because that means America did slavery historically and it was wrong. And these people are American exceptionalists. They think America is never wrong on anything. So, let's watch conservatives now be woke for once.
So we go from American diabolists to American supremacists.
So you guys know there's been this new moral panic around CRT, critical race theory.
Because conservatives always cry about every single thing.
To get more involved with school curriculums and curriculums, however you say it. And they're trying to sort of shape it in the direction they want. And of course, the direction they want is more of the, hey, don't teach anything I don't personally like. I mean, we went through this in the past, right, with creationism and intelligent design versus evolution.
And see design
every now and then there's sort of this cultural backlash to
I love that.
School curriculums, and they try to bend it to the will of a certain political ideology. Now, they claim, hey man, CRT goes too far in the other direction, and they argue, hey, it teaches that reverse racism is correct. It teaches, like, white people should feel bad for their history of whiteness leading to all these problems or whatever.
It doesn't? Only idiots on the left would advocate that, but that's not what CRT is. And nor is pointing out that America has racist past doesn't mean that all whites are evil, or is it saying it? But it is the fact America was historically, institutionally racist, slavery and all that.
No, not institutionally. Remember, it was originally existentially racist. It's still institutionally racist, but it was existentially racist.
And ethno-state, pretty much, too.
Yep.
So, yeah, all these things are facts, and they need to be talked about. But conservatives don't like that.
Specifics.
Of course they don't, because they're evil.
Oftentimes, the mask slips. I mean, this is happening with Ron DeSantis in Florida, right?
Conservatives wearing a mask to
Ron
hide their
DeSantis
bigotry?
says, we're only
think that
banning
happens
books
ever.
that are like trying to show
It's called,
porn to
well, they
10-year-olds or
tried
whatever.
to.
These are things he
And
said.
they failed
And then
a lot.
you go through the list of the stuff that's actually being banned, and it's like, these are run-of-the-mill stories that have nothing to do with porn in any way, shape, or form. It has to do with, one of them was about a female black basketball player who, had to make it and had to...
We covered that, too, because of some crazy Karen Republican bitch that wanted it banned because of, it promoted racism against whites. I remember we covered she was actually part of a, Confederate group that had hardcore Southern revisionism and lost cause crap.
Fight her way to the top or whatever. There's famous biographies of some civil rights heroes that they're banning and not allowing the kids to read and stuff. So the devil's always in the details. Well, now we have quite possibly the most absurd example of the overreach of the anti-CRT crowd. Here you have a teacher by the name of Greg Wickenkamp. He taught 8th grade social studies in Iowa. And a Republican legislator accused him of violating a law against teaching CRT, critical race theory. But again, what exactly do they mean by critical race theory, right? There is an academic critical race theory, and we went through the Wikipedia page, for example, of that theory, and there's some stuff in it I agree with, some stuff I probably disagree with. But here's what they mean by critical race theory. So Mr. Wickenkamp asked his superintendent, I guess he was getting sort of grilled over this because they heard the complaint from the legislator, so he has a meeting with them, and they asked the superintendent whether he asked if he's allowed to teach that slavery is wrong, and take note of what the superintendent's answer is.
Knowing that I should stick to the facts and knowing that to say slavery was wrong, that's not a fact. That's a stance. Is it acceptable for me to teach students that slavery was wrong?
I think it goes back to the part with critical race theory is that we can say this is what happened, and again, you probably know more about it than I do, Greg, and I think that's maybe even Maya and Laura's both, is that this is all new stuff, but in my opinion here is what happened in our history, and we had people that were slaves within our state. We're not supposed to say to them, how does that make you feel? We can't, or does that make you feel bad? We're not to do that part of it.
He didn't ask that though. What he's saying is, if I teach slavery is wrong, that is a stance. That's not just a fact. Like, is that okay? And she's going on this long word salad rant.
We can't, or does that make you feel bad? We're not to do that part of it. To say is slavery wrong? I really need to delve into it to see is that part of what we can or cannot say.
Excuse you? So Republican legislators, under the guise of cracking down on CRT, have now sufficiently scared the superintendents to the point where even a simple value judgment like slavery is wrong is now controversial?
Because that's how conservatives
I don't know if that goes too far. You don't know if that goes too far.
Everything is
wrong.
controversial
You don't know if that goes too far.
Saying slavery is wrong? That's offensive to the right.
Wow.
And I don't know that, Greg, because I just don't have that. So I need to know more on that side.
Wow.
I'm sorry on that part.
Yeah. I think with the 5 minutes running down, I'm I understand the level of support I'll be provided from here on out. I appreciate your time. Thank you for meeting today.
So in other words, the superintendent is terrified by the Republican legislator who's complaining that this guy's teaching CRT. And he says, look, yes, give the facts, give the information, but it is a value judgment, and it is a stance, and it is an opinion to say slavery is wrong. Is that okay? And her reaction is, no. I don't know. Maybe that goes too far. Maybe it doesn't. No. It's, I guess we'll find out. And he feels, of course, like the superintendent is not taking his back against...
Because conservatives are Karens.
On his side against
and
the
Kevin's.
Republican legislator. Man, that is astonishing.
It's ironic that we're saying Karen in that way because my
I'm not going to say
coworker, one of my coworkers at my new job that I should be starting soon. She's actually called Karen.
Just like Karen in the Johto Elite Four, remember?
Yep.
Teaching is like easy.
And she's actually the opposite of a Karen.
Yep.
But I will say this. Of course, the teacher should strive for facts, information, data, like that all comes first, right? Like
America done good, America done bad. Ain't that hard?
Secondary.
Yep.
But for a lot of idiots on the left and the right, that's too much.
Yeah.
But there are certain value judgments that, as a human being that has even a bare minimum amount of logic or empathy or morality, that you're gonna make, right? Like, this isn't a controversial thing like, hey, I'll tell you what my take on what the tax rate should be is. It's not an area where there's reasonable disagreement to be had among different people. This is an area that's pretty cut and dry.
Even
the same way that,
saying we should have a tax rate at all is being considered critical race theory.
If you teach Nazism, like teach about what happened in Nazi Germany in World War II, you're going to give the facts about Nazism and exactly what happened and who the players were and what their ideology was and the years they were in power, etc. But you're also going to have a value judgment attached to that and be like, yeah, it was bad and wrong, genocidal, quite literally, right?
A lot on the right would kind of beg to differ with you on that one, Kyle.
So that's a value judgment people can accept.
Just like they defend Putler,
right?
remember?
Well, then this is going to be one as well on slavery. It's going to be the same thing. But see, then what happens is they get like, they're pushing the limit. You know what I mean? Because then, you know, you could also argue, and you should, that like segregation was wrong. And the Civil War was about slavery. And all of a sudden, you're in an area that they would say is controversial. Actually, no, it was about, it's the war of northern aggression, and the South was fighting for states' rights. And so all of a sudden, things that you thought were simple questions, people are objecting on the grounds that you actually don't know what you're talking about, or you're missing all this nuance or whatever. And it's like, as a teacher, all you can ask is give the facts, give the information, give the data, and then give reasonable value judgments to the best of your ability, right? And then let the chips fall where they may. And you're going to have a situation where usually, you know, attracted to teaching are usually people who lean left. It's true. But, like, you might have some people who lean right. You got to just sort of let them do their job and then let the chips fall where they may. And if you have egregious oversteps, yes, you could take action. But what is an egregious overstep, right? And obviously teaching slavery is wrong is not an egregious overstep by any stretch of the imagination.
To the members of the right, that is
it is the most reasonable thing. It is a stance. It is an opinion. It is a value judgment. But that's part of being human, right? Like, look, compare teaching to, like, what I do, news and politics, and commentary. Again, what I try to do is, here's the facts, here's the information, and now I will give you my take. And, you know, that's the job. That's the job description. That's what I'm supposed to do. And for a teacher, you know, it's kind of a similar thing. Facts, information, data, and then here's a value judgment. Now, in areas where you know it's nuanced and you know there's massive areas of gray, you should teach the nuance and the gray area. You should. But, like, on an issue like slavery, there's not much gray area. On an issue like were the Nazis bad, there's not much gray area. And then
Conservatives be like,
I know
hold my
for
beer
sure,
on
like,
that
if I was
one,
a teacher,
Kyle.
they would think I was the most controversial teacher of all time, even though I would try my best to be as objective as possible. So a good example is like, if you're teaching about American history, it is literally an amalgamation of the dumbest, shittiest things and the greatest things. Like, if you teach about American history, you have to bring up slavery, you have to bring up Jim Crow, you have to bring up nuking innocent civilians in Japan.
Native
you have to bring
American
up the illegal and
genocide.
offensive
Yep.
war in Iraq.
Yep.
You have to bring up the Native American genocide. Like, all that you have to bring up and discuss honestly and openly and fairly and do it justice with actual information. But then you also have to bring up, for example, the New Deal. That's wonderful. The Civil Rights era. That's wonderful.
Winning
And
World
so, like,
War
teach
II.
the good and the bad.
Yes.
And get all the information out there and do reasonable value judgments. But we've reached the
But
point
see,
now
there
where...
are members on the
we'll
left
just-
and a
we'll
whole
wrap
bunch
it
of the
up on this
right that
point
don't
here.
agree with
Yeah.
that.
But, like, we've reached a
Because they're
point now
wackos.
where the right is objecting to anything and everything that's slightly left of center being taught in school. Even a value judgment like slavery is wrong. And ironically, they argue, hey, people are injecting politics into the classroom, and we need
That's
to
you,
stop.
though.
That's what they're
Yeah.
saying. But they don't realize they are also injecting politics into the classroom.
But you see,
Yeah.
Kyle, when they do it, that's okay. But if we do it in their eyes, that's bad.
Politics is everything. Everything is inherently political. And they have a stance too. Even a stance that is just defending the status quo is inherently political.
It's not
So-
it's not political. It's just
There is no
based
such
when we
thing
say
as a
it. It's only
non-political
political
classroom.
when you do
You
it.
understand what I'm saying? Like, that it doesn't
Yeah.
exist. It's not possible to do that. How can you discuss history or social studies or civics or whatever in a non-political way? I mean, I guess you could say math is non-political, right? But like science. But
No,
science
they
even-
make it. They
not
make
even
it.
science sometimes there's controversy, right?
thing.
So they are just as political, if not more political, and it just so happens that, in my opinion, their actual stances are way more egregious and way further over the line and way more illogical than this teacher who takes the obvious position of, like, slavery is wrong. That is an opinion, that is a value judgment, but it's a fair one, and I'm going to make it. And now they're getting pushback over that. It's like when that woman showed up to a school board meeting and got really, really angry that they were teaching about Gandhi in, like, her middle schooler's class. And it's like, wow, I think you guys are sort of telling on yourselves. It's not about you want to keep the curriculum pure or good. It's that you want them to be taught by your standards, and your standards happen to suck. Your standards happen to be really, really dumb. So anyway, I mean, this is quite an issue, man. This is quite an issue. You know, maybe I naively thought it would never get this bad, right? It would never get to the point where it's like they're objecting to slavery being bad, being taught in school,
Kyle,
but here we are.
That's quite common,
Here
actually,
we are.
even up to 10 plus
And,
years ago. It's nothing new.
I don't know what to do about it other than to fight back against the ignorance and stand behind the teachers who are being reasonable.
Or
But
hope the idiots just hurry up
It
and
seems like their
die, 'cause
superintendents
most of them
aren't
are
even
old.
willing
Yep.
to stand up for them, and that's devastating. Because what we're going to do is get a curriculum that more and more over time is going to creep further and further and further right. And as it goes further right, they will pretend like, no, we're just making it better. We're making it a more honest curriculum. When it's just as political, if not more political, it's just in a right-wing direction, which comes with some yikesy beliefs, like objecting to slavery being wrong. All right, guys, that's the show.
All right, so yeah. What do you gotta say about conservatives being Karens once again?
Well, that's how much they just carrying out, because they are.
And speaking of which, we have another topic of them soon being another Karen earlier. That's gonna be funny.
Yep,
All right.
all the TikTok stuff. Oh.
Alright, so now we're going to have to talk about this again. Why do I have to talk about this? I did a video on this back in 2020. So, the American government, once again, not even Trump this time, is considering banning TikTok. Because Chinese spying on us. I mean,
Yep.
you do know...
Because apparently if you've got TikTok on your phone, you're a Chinese spy.
Even though America spies on us, so what's the difference in
Yep.
that regard? It's spying either way. So how about
Nothing.
you stay out America too in that regard? And also, well, we're going to get to it in a bit because Mike is going to cover it, as Jamal Bowen destroy the people that want to ban TikTok. That's hilarious.
Yes.
TikTok CEO is scheduled to testify before the House Energy and Commerce Committee today in what I'm assuming will be an effort to convince U.S. lawmakers to not ban TikTok. And I'm sure that hearing is going to be incredibly unhinged because, as you're probably aware of by now, the vitriol towards TikTok is pretty bipartisan. Both Democrats and Republicans cite security concerns since the app is owned by China, and even some accuse the app of transing the kids. And no, that's not a joke.
Do you think
that Kirk! Charlie Kirk
is largely because of TikTok?
Who else?
Yes. I think it is absolutely.
Oh no! It's the lips of TikTok cunt! Oh no!
So about 4.
Hey, can't you just fuck off and die already?
Hey, if we're gonna ban anyone, how about we ban her instead from social media because she's actually caused violence in the world, unlike TikTok.
35 seconds. Explain to the older listeners that might be skeptical of that why. They say, how could somebody become trans because of a social
skeptical
media
and I'm not old at all.
Well, the idea
You're older than me, Kurt.
To target kids, right? You don't see really a lot of older people on it. It's
Kirk is. What if I told you Kirk is like just 2 weeks older than me?
Yeah, I'll believe it.
It is. Like, how? What happened? We're the same age by a few weeks, and he turned out this shitty way compared to me.
Very kid-friendly. And the Chinese algorithm, they feed this stuff specifically to American kids.
Chaya Rychek, China hates the LGBT. So why would they care?
Yep.
Why would they care if American kids are trans?
So they're feeding these trans activist content, telling kids, look, go on puberty blockers. You might be the opposite gender. Maybe you'll be happier. And I believe that it's a really sophisticated algorithm that's directly feeding this to our children.
And also, you don't choose to be trans, you fucking idiot. You are who you are. How many times do we have to tell you this, you stupid fucks?
That's exactly right. I just want everyone to understand. I mean, look, TikTok owned by the Chinese Communist Party. We have enough evidence for me to say this. I on good authority believe, and I think any rational person would, that the Chinese Communist Party military installations are programming the algorithm to make our children more likely to be trans, to try to get young men to be ashamed of their country. The CCP has a gateway into every...
What bunch of crap is this, dude? This doesn't work. And I already know the stick that I've heard for like the last 10 years. They're doing this to make America weak and China's going to be unstoppable of all that. You do know China's more likely to collapse than America, right? Do you know all the problems they've had the last few years? Plus they're in a authoritarian shithole that all the world pretty much hates. And if they do anything to Taiwan, then they're going to experience the exact same pain Russia's experiencing right now. And even leftists also do this crap too. That China's. I remember there's one leftist I follow the last few years on Twitter. He's acting like America's trying to instigate a war with China and China's gonna win. No, to both. America's not starting shit with China. It's China. And also, if a war did break out with China, China's gonna lose because we're gonna navally blockade their coastline and they're gonna be economically destroyed forever and suffer massive famine because, unlike them, we can feed ourselves. They have to import their shit. And no one likes them either.
Single one of our kids via TikTok.
Yes, China, famous friend to trans people, as we all know, who is seeking to algorithmically manipulate the world into becoming trans through TikTok. That's why they built the app, probably. Seems very, very plausible. I shouldn't have to explain this, but it doesn't work that way. Being trans is not contagious, and even if it were, you certainly couldn't catch it through TikTok. But on top of that, if you could convince someone to be trans or gay, don't you think that 100% of the population would be straight and cis, considering that's what we see the most of?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't seem to understand. Why would people choose to be gay or trans when their life would be worse because people like assholes like piece of shit like Kirk here would demonize them? Like there's no benefit.
Exactly. And remember that people like J.K. Rowling would... are literally, I'll say allegedly, channeling funds to literally fund people murdering transgender people.
But that offends her if you call her a TERF, remember?
Even though she's the definition of one.
That's
literally, I'm not even kidding you. One of the definitions they had for a while was actually JK. Actually, literally just said in one of the shitpost dictionaries. As you said, ding, did JK Rowling.
Yep, and she would call you a sexist pig for that too.
Even though she's a sexist pig, because her turfism comes from, she goes big chunk with her from her misandry.
Yep, because she hates men.
I mean, these people are so stupid that I don't even know if they think about the words that come out of their mouth sometimes. Now, that might be
Mike,
the dumbest argument
think?
in favor of banning TikTok, but in truth, no one, in my opinion, has actually made a good argument to ban TikTok. And really no lawmakers up until this point have been willing to condemn the fear-mongering around TikTok. But Congressman Jamal Bowman is perhaps the only lawmaker, at least to my knowledge, to publicly condemn the idea of banning TikTok. And that's good, because banning TikTok is a very dumb idea. NBC News reports, quote, "This is a space where these creators have found a platform to share their ideas, their inspirations, their thoughts, their voices with the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And why do we want to take that away?" Bowman told NBC News. "Why do we need to ban a platform that 150 million Americans now use? There are many apps on our phones right now that are Chinese apps. And so the idea that, oh, TikTok is the boogeyman, it's just part of a political fear-mongering that's happening," said Bowman, who posts frequently on the video sharing app and has a substantial following himself. He compared criticism of TikTok to Republican fear-mongering about an open border and the debt limit, as well as xenophobia around China. Quote, "I haven't seen any hard evidence that TikTok is committing some form of espionage," he said. "What I've heard is speculation, and what I've heard is innuendo." Bingo. Both parties have failed to demonstrate why TikTok specifically poses some unique threat to U.S. security enough to warrant a ban. Now, listen, if they want to restrict the use of TikTok on government devices, as many governments around the world have already done, I think that that's perfectly reasonable. If it's a security threat, that's how you handle it. But to ban it for everyone, that to me is just unreasonable. It's almost certainly the case that TikTok is indeed collecting user data. I admit this. They're doing it for advertising purposes at a minimum. Perhaps they are using the algorithm to sow discord among Americans, as if we needed any help with that. But if these are all reasons that lead you to the conclusion that we should ban TikTok, then why just limit the ban to TikTok? We already know what other tech companies do. Facebook's whistleblower informed us that their algorithm intentionally sows discord among users in order to increase engagement. Google also exploits user data that it collects. Every major tech company, regardless of their country of origin, violates user privacy in overt and egregious ways. And it's not worse simply because China does it. It's bad when they all do it. That's the reality. Their own logic. As users,
but YouTube, Google, Facebook are not Chinese. Therefore, they're not bad, because reality is just racism.
We do deserve privacy. We need a digital bill of rights. We need regulations. What we don't need, however, is the U.S. government singling out one app purely for political reasons. Furthermore, how many U.S. lawmakers calling for a TikTok ban have accepted campaign contributions from other tech companies like Google or Facebook? How is that not a conflict of interest? How do we know this isn't just another instance where U.S. politicians are doing the bidding of their donors? Because obviously, it would benefit companies like Google and Facebook to see their biggest competitor banned. I mean, why do you think YouTube recently introduced Shorts? It's because they're trying to compete with TikTok, who's winning right now in the social media war. Now, that's all speculation. I have no idea if the result of this TikTok ban or the proposed ban is due to corruption. But what I will say is that banning TikTok is a very bad idea that I do not support. And to the extent that the Biden administration chooses to move forward with this plan, it will backfire. Some users whose livelihoods depend on the platform's existence are justifiably angry, and they're already making their voices known by protesting. And the Biden administration, I don't think that they seem to realize how a ban would undeniably enrage younger voters and backfire, as NBC News explains. In 2020, Aidan Cohn Murphy used TikTok to rally support for Joe Biden. Now he's trying to use the platform to stop Biden from killing it. Quote, "I'm not defending TikTok as a company. I'm defending my entire generation," said the 19-year-old Harvard freshman who, as a high schooler during the 2020 campaign, founded a group called TikTok for Biden. It has since changed its name to Gen Z for Change, formally incorporated as a political nonprofit, and says it now includes 500 creators with a combined 500 million followers on multiple platforms. If they went ahead with banning TikTok, it would feel like a slap in the face to a lot of young Americans, added Cohn Murphy. Democrats don't understand the political consequences this would have. Some worry that if Washington bans Gen Z's favorite app for reasons that most are likely
you saw
unfamiliar.
during the hearings, all the questions about how do you send a tweet, how do you turn on a computer, how do you use Facebook, how do you do
Oh
this
no, I'm
thing?
talking to
How
my
does
mom
this
again
thing?
about computers. Oh God.
Only
How do
worse.
I send an email? How do I do this? How do I do that? It's literally that easy. You just press a button, done. Yet that's too hard for some people.
With accusations that the app is collecting users' location data and sharing it with the Chinese government, it might leave a lasting mark on an entire generation, depressing turnout, increasing apathy, and shaping their view of the role of the federal government. Banning TikTok? I mean, are you trying to engage young voters or not? What are we doing here? Representative Jamal Bowman, a former middle school principal and member of the Progressive Squad, said in an interview, quote, "They will absolutely stay at home. There's no question about that." And again, Jamal Bowman is absolutely correct here, and I hope that more lawmakers speak out against this. This is going to unquestionably backfire. If all of a sudden YouTube was banned and I lost the platform that I spent years building up, I would never forget that, and I would be sure to punish the politicians responsible for its demise at the very next election. And it's not just, to be clear, the influencers.
And then Vosh would have a meltdown with us, remember?
Yes, because he, just like Dorr, is a CIA agent.
Ooh, Harry will be very angry if you say that about Dorr, remember?
Who we should be considering here. It's also the average.
Harry is a useful idiot of the CIA, even if he doesn't know it.
No, you are because you're shit libs that defend Ukraine even though they're evil.
Users who I'm assuming use the app because it brings them joy and happiness. Why take that away from them? Why take that away from 150 million people?
Because
in America
we're
only.
Ignorant.
Now look, with that being said, I fully acknowledge that any app that I use is going to transmit data to corporations and foreign governments, and I hate that. But I'm at least aware of the risk. I know about the risk. So if the Chinese government learns about my affinity for funny cat TikToks and low-calorie recipes, I find that as disturbing as Facebook knowing about these interests that I have as well. The goal shouldn't be to arbitrarily punish one company. The goal for lawmakers across the globe who's concerned about TikTok should be to create international standards so as to protect all user data on all apps. Make sure they're encrypted and protected from third parties. But those are just my thoughts. But this is probably a pretty good time to let you know that the Humanist Report is also on TikTok. So be sure to give us a follow there while you still can.
I'll pass on that because that's too young for me. But anyways, what do you guys say about this? Because Republicans and Democrats trying to ban TikTok again.
Yep. It's one thing to just block the thing for government platforms. It's another to do something like this and just ban it for everyone.
How about
anyway,
you all go fuck off and let freedom fly? Oh, that's right. You all don't believe in freedom. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. All right. So now, on to the next topic.
Republicans' unplanned heterosexual couple school ban.
This is just hilarious. Republican finds out her anti-gay bill would ban heterosexual teachers. Are you ready for more woke crap from the right because they don't think about stuff? This is great. Here we go.
Okay, so I love this story so much because it shows you how hollow these anti-LGBTQ plus Republicans are.
And I actually
And they're
don't think that they
stupid.
really know the effect of
Yep.
the policies that they are producing. So we'll see a video here in a moment, but let me just give you a little bit of context. GOP lawmaker blasted by fellow Republican over proposed Missouri Don't Say Gay law. So, I mean, these are popping up everywhere. Not necessarily that surprising, but the author of the
Thank
bill,
you, Ron
or I should say the
DeSantis.
sponsor of the bill,
Yep.
just
Adult
cannot
death
defend her
sentence.
position. So, a Missouri lawmaker unloaded on a fellow GOP colleague. So on a fellow GOP colleague. Presumably we have Republican on Republican violence here, which is always good to see. Behind a bill model
Always.
after Florida's Don't Say Gay law, State Representative Ann Kelly sponsored House Bill 634, which would ban sexual classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties relating to sexual orientation or gender identity shall occur. But under questioning from GOP colleague Phil Cristofanelli, Kelly didn't appear to understand the implications of her own bill. So Cristofanelli, a conservative Republican who is openly gay, asked if under the law, Martha Washington could be identified as the nation's first president's wife. So that makes sense, because it's always curious to see a Republican questioning their colleague if they are being homophobic, but here you have somebody who is self-interested. He's gay, and he thinks that this is homophobic. First of all, Cristofanelli, you might want to leave the Republican Party if you are concerned about homophobia.
They
but
want you
that's
dead,
a
so don't
different
be in the
topic
party.
for a different day. Let's watch this
Exactly.
exchange because it was just so incredible. In fact, let me zoom out a little bit so you can see. Like I want to zoom in so you can see, but my box is blocking it. So let's press play.
I'm just going to read you the language in your bill. No classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties relating to sexual orientation or gender identity shall occur. Lady, you mentioned George Washington. Who is Martha Washington?
His wife?
Under your bill, how could you mention that in a classroom?
So to me, that's not sexual orientation.
It literally
is. Literally is.
But see,
Yep.
this is what we talk about, people. Conservatives don't see heterosexuality as a sexual orientation, which it is. To them, it's just normal and therefore not the same thing. Well, sorry, it is the same thing.
Really? So it's only really certain sexual orientations that you want prohibited from introduction in the
Do you
classroom.
have language to make that better, to make it where you're not talking?
Lady, I didn't introduce your bill.
Okay.
And I didn't write it. You wrote it, and so I'm asking what it means. Which sexual orientations do you believe should be prohibited from Missouri classrooms?
We all have a moral compass. And my moral compass is compared with the Bible.
Yeah, how about go fuck yourself?
Lady, I believe during your
Exactly.
testimony, you said that you didn't want teachers' personal beliefs entering the classroom, but it seemed a lot
And
like
that
your
implied-
personal
and that
belief.
includes you,
would
too.
like
I
to
don't want
enter
your
all
shit
Missouri
involved in
classrooms.
schools whatsoever.
You can believe something without putting that onto somebody by the way you behave. And you can have beliefs and morals and values that guide you through life.
And you
I don't dispute that, but I'm asking about the language of your bill and
No,
how
she
it would
can't,
permit the
because she's
mention
evil.
of the historical figure Martha Washington. Could you explain that to me?
So what does she? Why is she famous? Is she famous because she's married to George Washington?
It seems like that would be a relevant fact in her biography, yes. Could it be mentioned under the plain reading language of your bill? Is that a no?
I don't know, sir.
Okay.
That was incredible. And I love how when it came to the Bible portion, she's like, well, you can believe something without like pushing it on other people. Like I'm paraphrasing what she said, but you're literally passing a bill to push your religion on everyone by forcing queer people to be quiet in the classroom, go back into the closet, and you don't even understand the ways in which that same law that you're pushing will affect heterosexual couples. Because believe it or not, to say, this is my wife, your mommy and your daddy. You are introducing the concept of sexual orientation into the classroom.
Exactly.
Is it in an age-appropriate manner? Yes. But they'll contend that if you were to say, this kid, Dylan, has 2 dads, well, they think that's not age-appropriate. Any and all LGBTQ plus references need to be cleansed. But if you mention mommy and daddy, that's not sexual orientation. Lady, do you know what sexual orientation is or gender identity is? By him saying lady to you, that alone is invoking gender identity, right?
Yep.
To say Mr.
Actually, remember,
Mrs.,
being a woman is political, according to them.
Mm-hmm. That is invoking gender identity. We do it so frequently that we don't even realize when we're doing it, right? But this imbecile right here thinks that she is protecting children by banning discussions of sexual orientation in classrooms, not realizing that, oops, that's going to apply to straight people too. If we're actually trying to interpret the bill as objectively as possible, that's going to affect straight people. And I would encourage any single teacher in these states to comply with these new laws as maliciously as possible. There was one teacher in Florida that was basically, since you can't invoke gender identity, she said, okay, well, I'm just going to refer to all of my students using gender-neutral pronouns. That's what we're going to do.
Ooh.
That's the way you want it. This is what the law says, so I'm just being
Clever.
cautious here. I didn't write the law, you did. So I'm just doing what you want me to do. I think that that's what you really need to do, because these idiots don't realize that what they're doing will affect them too. Now, you might ask, well, why don't they just say gay people specifically? Why are they vague saying sexual orientation? Well, first and foremost, you can't, because that's unconstitutional. You can't target a group on the basis of their sexual orientation or any other immutable characteristic. Now, second of all, they write these laws very purposefully vague, all to make sure that it has the broadest reach imaginable, meaning that if you don't really know how to interpret a particular law, odds are you're going to play it safe to avoid litigation. So you be overly cautious, because if you write these bills with a level of specificity that lets these teachers know what is and isn't appropriate, then you're not accomplishing what you ultimately want to accomplish. So you be as vague as possible, as far-reaching as possible, and that's how you, in their view, eliminate sexual orientation out of the classroom. But if you're going to get rid of gay sexual orientation or bisexual sexual orientation, you got to get rid of straight sexual orientations as well. So that means we don't get to hear about Eleanor Roosevelt. We don't get to hear about anyone's husband or wife, because all of that is tantamount to invoking sex and sexual orientation in the classroom. So, yeah, I love to see them questioned about this, because these people are absolute rubes. They're just bigoted. They're ignorant. And that's it. There's nothing more to say about this. They're just fucking stupid. Period. End of story. And when you just apply even a minimal amount of scrutiny to their beliefs, they crumble. They can't defend it, because it's just hate in the purest form.
Yep. So we got to say about a Karen Republican, as always, trying to ban gays from schools, only end up banning straight couples instead, too.
just ban everything. Or ban everything. That's what she didn't realize she was doing.
Or better yet, hear me out, you idiot conservatives. How about you stop making a big deal about the LGBT community and just accept them for who they are and drop your bigoted BS? That seems pretty easy to do, don't it? Oh, that's right, I forgot. You conservatives can't do that ever. And I mean
ever. They
ever.
have no principles except owning the libs.
Speaking of which...
Or rather, failing at owning the libs.
And speaking of which, guess who's raging at me right now while we're getting ready for our final topic?
Oh, he can go fuck himself.
We're
actually doing something to help. He's actively trying to ruin the world even more than it already is.
He's probably crying about your shit. You're doing your shit Libby show, and you play boring ass Minecraft instead of talking to me and saying Ukraine's evil and all that.
And the Ukraine is a Nazi terrorist state and must be genocided.
Speaking of which, it's time to get to our final topic from the Caspian Report.
A forever war.
Is the Russo-Ukraine war turn into a forever war? ? Well, let's see about that one then.
Ukraine has had a bountiful harvest. It has taken out more than 8,600 Russian assets, including tanks, armored vehicles, aircraft, and numerous naval vessels, all coming at the price tag of $18 billion in military spending up to mid-November 2022. The cost-benefit analysis of American support for Ukraine is exceptionally profitable. The Pentagon has spent a little over 5% of its defense budget at the time to eat away at Russia's combat readiness. All this while having no American boots on the ground. The billions of dollars spent have steadily increased since November, but from an arms race lens, it is an incredible return on investment. Russians, however, see it differently. From their perspective, the war is about scale. The Ukrainians cannot fight a war of attrition, they don't have the numbers. So Russian military officials figure the longer the hostilities last, the more the outcome will favor Russia, which can muster more resources. What is happening and likely to continue in the coming months are more missile attacks, drone strikes, artillery bombardments, and hundreds of thousands more fresh recruits sent to the battlefield.
And it doesn't matter how many troops you got in the battlefield if they don't have weapons, you know. Have you ever played Hoi 4? I know how that is when your troops have shortages. Yeah.
While the Russians gather their numbers and assemble their tanks and missiles, they're about to find out why America has no universal healthcare.
Unfortunate, but yep, they're going to find out why we don't have universal healthcare, as they're facing it right now without us even trying. Also look at the general chat for a laugh.
Conflicts like Ukraine seem distant, but the effects on the global economy have been devastating. Following the invasion, gas prices in Europe jumped by 275%, and in the US, a gallon of gas reached as high as $5. These prices hurt not only consumers but businesses too. Only 2.6% of the companies in the S&P 500 expect their earnings to be positive this quarter. Morgan Stanley warns of a death zone in the market, indicating a possible 26% collapse by June. That's why I and thousands of my subscribers are using a platform that specializes in an asset class whose price outpaced the S&P 500 by 131% over the last 26 years. Blue Chip Art. Masterworks is the platform I use, the sponsor of today's video. Now,
no interest in your sponsorship
and
or
the
interest in the
casualties.
video.
After giving the whole armed conflict careful, meticulous thought, Russia has decided to make things worse. As many as 500,000 fresh conscripts are currently being trained and equipped for another go at Kiev in the summer. Russia is also mass producing.
Did you see the video recently? They're bringing, I can't remember what tank number it is, but they're bringing tanks to the front that were used at the end of World War II. they're bringing out tanks that should be in a museum because that's how desperate they are.
Yep.
I hope you enjoy being those T-55, whatever number it is, when you meet a Leopard 2 or an Abrams.
Beyond the Urals, likely
maybe your top
loitering
will blow up
munitions,
again
cruise
too.
missiles, and hypersonic systems. Upon completion, Russia's new offensive could see movement from either Donbass in the east, Kherson in the south, or even Belarus in the north. That seems like complete madness, but it's the madness that fits Russia's strategy thus far. And while Ukraine is better prepared than ever, 500,000 soldiers, regardless of how ill-equipped and trained, is a lot to defend against. Ukraine is now in a race against time. It needs to get more weapons, tanks, artillery, and a lot more ammunition before Russia's major offensive. Ukraine could be lost if the necessary weapons are not gathered in time. America has since stepped up its support. The exact amount of aid given by the United States is difficult to determine. Aid has come in the form of multiple programs, loans, and military assistance packages. However, from January 2022 to January 2023, the United States sent more than $76 billion in aid to Ukraine. 61% of that sum was earmarked for defense. For America, the war in Ukraine has become a proxy conflict with Russia, a conflict
Careful,
that
Bosch.
can be
Dylan
fought
Burns and
without
other
any
leftists will be
American
very angry you
casualties,
said that,
while also
Siobhan.
giving NATO a renewed
though it is
mandate.
true.
It may be difficult to comprehend, but the $76 billion aid package is low in grand strategic terms. It certainly is many times lower than the costs of the Afghan or Iraqi conflicts. As far as
Well, to be fair, that's a year. Where you're comparing Iraq and Afghanistan that went on for over a decade plus and stuff like that.
Yep.
So, but hey, it just shows when Russia can't even beat America's a fraction of America's military budget. Oof.
Yep.
conflicts go, Ukraine is a bargain. But the Ukrainians can only continue the fight so long as the Americans keep sending financial and material aid. This is not to take away from Ukrainian tactics and strategy, but foreign aid has given Ukraine the means to sustain its operations, giving it an edge in intelligence, technology, and communications. Russia's loss of manpower and weapons, and the fact that the Russians already pay an increasingly higher share of their GDP to fight in Ukraine, is a win for the United States. Russia has lost so much that its combat readiness will not pose a danger to Europe in the near future, all at the cost of $18 billion in military spending up to mid-November 2022. These billions of dollars matter, and they come at the expense of alternative civilian programs. But the US economy currently stands at...
And that's why, how many times we gotta tell you peoples, you don't mess with America, because bad things will happen to you. Don't forget what happened to the South, Japan, and Al-Qaeda. Always have them as an example.
$25 trillion, and for as long as the Ukrainians keep eating away at Russian military capabilities, those billions of dollars are worth it in grand strategic terms. But if this be a conflict of numbers, the Kremlin is game. Russia has teamed up with Iran to build missile production facilities beyond the Ural Mountains. It has also purchased thousands of cheap Iranian drones. The aim is to use large numbers of low-cost cruise missiles and loitering munitions to exhaust Ukrainian air defenses and then, in due time, flip the cost-benefit analysis in their favor. Ukraine has been successfully knocking down Russian drones, but the price tag has been extraordinarily high. Many of the Ukrainian surface-to-air missiles cost more than the Russian-Iranian drones. According to Ukrainian analysts, it cost Ukraine up to 7 times more to down a Russian-Iranian drone than it does to launch one. That is the type of equation the Kremlin is counting on. Take the Iranian Shahed 136 drone as an example. It carries a 40-kilo warhead and can engage targets within a 1,200-kilometer range. Most importantly, the drones are dirt cheap, costing roughly $20,000 per unit. Ukraine, however, has been using a variety of missiles to shoot down the drones, each costing many times the Iranian drones. For instance, the Ukrainians have used S-300 batteries and NASAMS units, respectively costing $140,000 and $500,000 per missile to shoot down.
The thing though is America is doing Lend-Lease, so they're just giving this stuff to Ukraine. They're probably not paying a dime for this stuff. And also those drones are not going to be that effective. It doesn't matter if they manage to hit some of their targets. You still got to take over the territories, and drones are just not going to do that, though.
$20,000 drones.
Logistics falls
that
flat
is
on their
not
face.
A sustainable strategy in any shape or form. The Iranian drones are so cheap compared to Ukraine's available AA missiles, they have priced them out of the war. Russia can continue this type of attritional warfare for years. It has purchased over 2,000 units from Iran. Now Russia is raising the bar even further by building a secret weapon, a weapon unlike any other in history. It doesn't have a name yet, but Russia's Ministry of Digital Development is working on a centralized database for military commissions. It will be a system that cross-references data from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Ministry of Education and Science, the Federal Tax Service, the National Guard, the Pension Fund, and the Central Election Commission.
Somewhere by 2024 or 2025, the new system will be ready at the cost of billions of rubles. Imagine China's social credit system, but a militarized version of it. Upon completion, Russia will be able to assign a conscription credit score to its citizens and then track and recruit expendables within Russian society. It will be able to find those who are fit and liable for military service and then reach out to them by phone or email. It's a system that will be widely different from Russia's first.
The thing, though, is the expendables part. I'm sure it's going to continue going after minorities in Russia because Russia, the mobilization that happened back in September, was purposely designed to go after more of minorities in Russia instead of Russians. So that's not going to help you in that regard. That's going to cause ethnic tensions. Two, even if you're able to get all these troops together, if they're not equipped and trained, then they're going to mean nothing. That's the thing,
Exactly.
though. It's not going to mean a damn thing. Also, these people are not going to be happy about being mobilized either way, so I don't think this is really going to make a difference whatsoever.
Attempt at mobilization in the autumn of 2022, which actually inspires the Kremlin to do better. In practical terms, the new system will allow Russia to raise an army of fighting-age poor people, minorities, criminals, political dissidents, and disenfranchised communities. People who won't be missed, who won't raise social discontent should they go missing. Russia is presumed to have a mobilization capacity of about 25 million people. This
Can you imagine them actually mobilizing 25 million people? That would not happen.
4 million of them would then turn around and walk straight back into Russia and try to go after Putin.
Or flee into Central Asia and all that. Russia cannot afford. Russia's having so much trouble with just a few 100,000 troops. 24 billion, their economy will die.
Their economy would literally just implode. Just hearing the number.
Hell, they probably won't even do what America did during World War II and have women in the workforce because women are supposed to be at home, remember? Because misogyny.
new system will enable a more sustainable form of recruitment and allow the Russian state to tap into its massive manpower pool without triggering thousands of citizens to leave the country. In doing so, Russia will gain the means to wage a...
I think it was up to over 1 million Russian men already emigrate out of Russia from the war already. That's huge.
Forever war without experiencing conflict exhaustion. It's the perfect weapon, and it amplifies Russia's primary strength, manpower. Now, from a grand strategic angle, both America and Russia believe that whoever can muster more resources and hold out the longest will win in Ukraine. It's just that both sides are deciphering the cost-benefit analysis differently. Washington looks at things from a monetary perspective, while Moscow looks at things from a manpower perspective. But regardless, sometimes conflicts don't end in clear-cut settlements. The Korean War ended in a truce. The Gulf War resulted in unfinished business. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict led to a low-intensity conflict spanning decades. And Russia by itself is no stranger to frozen conflicts. Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Transnistria, Karabakh, Donbass, and Crimea, to name just a few. Americans, however, are less eager to endure frozen conflicts. A poll by the Wall Street Journal found that the number of Republicans who feel the United States is doing too much for Ukraine climbed from 6% in March 2022 to 48% in October 2022. That's roughly 30% of all Americans who feel like quitting. This trend shows that there are no guarantees that Washington will continue to provide military.
Biden's going to continue supporting Ukraine until the war ends or as long as he's in power. And he's going to be in president until at least January of 2025, unless he loses or whatever. So, at least for another 2 years, Ukraine has America's support no matter what. So, let's see about that later. And also, you've seen how bad Republicans have been lately, how shitty things they've done. I don't think they're going to have a good time, easy chance winning if they keep the way they're doing, especially since we saw in the midterms recently.
Aid to Ukraine in the future. And that's something the Russians are banking on. Because the United States, the lone superpower, doesn't lose wars, it loses interest. I've been your host, Shirvan.
Yeah, so we gotta see about that. Unfortunately, Shirvan was way more pessimistic than normal. And people have noticed that in the comments the last, like, few months of videos. That seems like a little bit not as nuanced and all that and such. Really weird. But yeah, we gotta see about that. Possibly the Russo-Ukraine war turned into a frozen conflict, which, honestly, since November, kind of has been that way, pretty much.
Yeah. It might thaw soon, but it probably will be like on again, off again for a good couple of years.
Until one side is completely crushed economically or militarily. And hopefully it's Ukraine that comes out on top. Oh, yeah. Hinkleboy will be very angry, though, if you say that.
He would rage. You would have a rage aneurysm.
Because he's too busy having a hard-on thinking of Putler.
and lusting over nuclear holocaust.
Yes. Alright, guys. That is all the topics for episode 72. So see you guys next time for episode 73.